So yeah, why do you do what you do? You've been talking about how you've been doing it for a few years now, and it's something that is quite unique for somebody that's in the monastic lifestyle. So, what compels you to do this and speak with the students and release this information to the public?
His name is Ajahn Po.
Yeah.
He is the abbot emeritus, I guess, of Wat Suan Mo, which was the home of Bhikku Buddhadasa. And my relationship to Ajahn Po goes way back to 1984. And so it was actually him suggesting things that didn't have any practicality to it. Like he wanted me to go to Chicago and he wanted me to go to Phuket. And after all of that, he says, well, let's do it online. And the Skype format got started then. So this is actually under his direction. But naturally, I'm quite willing to do it because I understand it the same way that he does. And that is that we have a duty to the Dhamma.
Mm.
We have many, many duties to the Dhamma. And if we don't do the duties that we have to the Dhamma, then we will, let us say, either suffer the consequences of that or not reap the benefits of having done it. And I find that it's greatly of benefit to myself to care about other people and to talk to them about the Dhamma. And it's been, let us say, uh, it's actually in the suttas. And it talks about that there's 5 ways to learn the Dhamma. And of all the ways of listening to it, chanting it, talking it over with friends, the best way and the deepest way that one learns the Dhamma is by teaching it.
Mm.
And so by teaching the Dhamma, I have learned it even better than I knew it before. I understand it with much deeper insights. And also, I've seen so many different students go through the same crap over and over again, so that I've got that kind of a deep understanding, and that I appreciate. I am very grateful for having been around so many people, seeing so many problems turn out to not be problems at all.
Huh. You think it's because of the repetition that it's more instilled in your own mind?
Yes, if I'm going to be talking to students 2, 3, 4 hours a day, then I'm thinking about the Dhamma 2, 3, 4 hours a day, rather than all being in the mischief.
Mm. That's interesting. Hmm. How long have you been on the path now?
What's the path?
That's true. What is the path? How long have you been a monastic? We'll say that. Living in Thailand.
Um, I arrived in Thailand in 1983 and became a monastic in 1984 after spending about 10 years or so in and out of India and various places, looking for love in all the wrong places.
And then you found it in Thailand?
Yes, with Bhikku Buddhadasa. I was actually at Wat Bodh Gaya in Thai and at Bodh Gaya in India, the Thai Wat there, and I met a monk who literally insisted that I go to see Bhikku Buddhadasa.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so within 6 weeks, I was there.
Hmm. Now, from what I understand, Bhikku Buddhadasa has a slightly alternative approach to Buddhism. Would you be able to go into that and explain that a little bit and why it's a little bit different from the, I guess, popular consensus of today's
I,
Buddhism?
I'm glad you used the word popular rather than alternate.
Hmm.
And you could actually go so far as to say that the popular view is always the alternate view in
Mm.
all cases. For instance, astronomy. The alternate view is what anybody and everybody thinks from centuries past. But the reality of it is not the alternate view, but the reality is that which the scientists are deeply discovering and continue to discover.
Mm.
And so they're not the alternate.
I see.
And they're not the popular group. So if you understand Buddhism from that perspective, I'll put it like this. I also was on a journey of discovery, and my journey of discovery was first to discover that Bhikku Buddhadasa actually knew the teachings of the Buddha. My first inclination was to think that he was the only one who did. And that the more that I got around and saw all of the very, very famous monks in Thailand who were also students and fans of his, including the Dalai Lama considers Bhikku Buddhadasa his elder brother.
Wow.
And so in that regard, I begin to get the idea that not only did I know it, but that a whole lot of people knew that Bhikku Buddhadasa had the right stuff. But little did I know then, what I began to understand later is that it wasn't Bhikku Buddhadasa who was the only one who knew it. That in fact, what happened is that in his, let us say, joining in to the old noble guard that already was deeply involved with Thailand and was already there, the monastic community was full of nobles. But that his introduction into the nobility was spectacular in the sense that he was teaching in, he was actually in the late Pali studies in Bangkok. And he was invited to give, I think it was a graduation ceremony. And that in there, it was a huge audience. And some of the people in that audience did not like what he was saying about emptiness and sunyata and that kind of thing, because it's not always a popular Theravada concept anyway. More the Mahayanas think of the emptiness, but he was also talking about emptiness of self. And they got upset about that because it interfered with their understanding of rebirth and reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that anger wound up to the point of being, let us say that he was brought up on charges of trying to destroy or break up the Sangha.
Oh.
And that there was a committee that was brought together, a committee of 20, a Sangha, Jasesa, is actually a kind of a big trial. Now, the point is that not everyone on that committee was against him. That in fact, he had quite a number of friends on that committee and new friends at that, because this was done in Bangkok and this was a big deal anyway. It wound up having some of the most important and influential monks in the country at the time, including the Sangharaj or the Samdek. And what happened is that they interrogated him and he would give them scriptural references and whatnot, which then caused a great number of other monks to start doing a deeper Pali research than they had done before. Now, there was two outcomes of this trial. One of the outcomes is that he was not reprimanded for, but the outcome of the trial is that he was teaching the right Dhamma to the wrong people. That the correct Dhamma should be kept within the group, and that he was an outsider and had rediscovered it and was saying it out loud, and they wanted him in the inner group, but they wanted him to be quiet. Well, they couldn't keep him from the inner group because the inner group is that of wisdom and knowledge, not a membership thing. All right. And so his position is that now in the 20th century, things are no longer as dangerous as they once were. I mean, Buddhism was basically wiped out in India because it was good stuff. And both the Hindus and the Muslims didn't like it. And so, because they couldn't control people once the person is free. And so let's stamp out freedom. Let's make them believe in gods and heavens and hells and devils and magical powers and rebirth and all of that kind of stuff, because then we can control them. But if they don't care about any of that stuff, then our ceremonies don't mean anything to them.
Hmm.
So this was where Bhikku Buddhadasa was. He was saying, now is the time to let this stuff be free. Let's bring it out into the open. And when what happened is that a lot of the monks who already were on the teetering verge, they got it. And so that's why he began to have so many high quality, well-known monks. An example of that would be Ajahn Panyananda at Wat Chulapatan. Wat Chulapatan is basically one of the largest, if not the largest, Wat in Thailand, and has been, and at least was for sure 40 years ago, and probably still is. And Ajahn Panyananda was the abbot of that Wat, and that whole Wat was basically dedicated then over the years to Bhikku Buddhadasa. But in fact, going back to the early part of my story, that Bhikku Buddhadasa's, there was a monk in Thailand. That monk in Thailand that I met was actually there from Wat Chulapatan. But that's part of the connection.
Oh.
Another thing that I found out on a visit when I was a monk in the United States, I came back to visit Achan Po, and it just happened to have been a time when it was time for him to go meet some people. And so he took me to Chumphon and Rayong and the Corn Sri Thammarat and to Phuket and to several other places around. Those names, I think people will know those names. And each time, especially with the Rayong, was the celebration of the installation of a new abbot. And that abbot was a monk at Wat Suan Mok when I was there in the 1980s.
Mm.
And that's also what happened with every one of these Wats that we went to. Were the abbots of those Wats were invited to become the abbots because they were already senior qualified, but they were also from Wat Suan Mok. So Wat Suan Moks and the abbots of Wat Suan Mok literally run Buddhism in South Thailand now. And the whole community is paying respect to Bhikku Buddhadasa. He's that kind of famous in South Thailand, but he's also quite big in Central Thailand also, with a huge, huge complex in Bangkok.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of people dedicated to translating every scrap of paper that they can find, or every video or audio tape that they can find. They've got them all cataloged and everything, but very little of it is in English now. So back to finishing off one of the points of the story is that Samdet Sangaraj, his name was Bhikku Buddhadasa, and that he had been appointed as the Samdet Sangaraj by another who had then disrobed to become king. He was born, his name was Virya, and he was born in 1860 and was the little brother of Chulalongkorn. And together with Chulalongkorn, these two basically reformed Buddhism way back when anyway. And so Thailand has been kind of noble and kind of not noble all along, especially quite close to the top. Close to the top, that's part of the reason why up until recently we have had a king in Thailand who was a benign king, as opposed to a greedy king, was because he was that kind of close to the Dhamma in the way that he governed. So in that case, power does not always corrupt.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
With wisdom. Okay, so then Bhikku Buddhadasa, the Samdet Sangaraj, actually developed a relationship with Bhikku Buddhadasa to train him. And then in 1939, I think it was, that Buddhadasa actually came to Wat Suan Mok, and that they have a whole library full of documents in the Thai language of the writings between these two noble monks. Hasn't been translated into English yet. But this is some of the prized possessions that they have. Is this dialogue between these two monks. But there are many other monks. And so Bhikku Buddhadasa is actually quite famous, and I feel very grateful for having a good relationship with Achan Po, who then kept me very close to Bhikku Buddhadasa.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an old history.
He seems like a Buddhist revolutionary in a way.
Let us at least say an eye opener, a
Yeah.
wisdom eye.
Mm. So what was I mean, if you could sum it up, what were the conflicts that he had with this alternate idea of Buddhism?
I would say that the conflict resolves around what is important and what is not important.
Hmm.
And like the Buddha, Bhikku Buddhadasa takes the position that nothing much is important. But there's a whole lot of people who call themselves Buddhist who thinks that a whole lot of stuff really is important and it's important to them.
Hmm. Mm.
And so that's the basic conflict. Some people think some things are important and other people think, no, they're not important. An example of that is believing in reincarnation. If you think believing in reincarnation is important, it's going to prevent you from dealing with the actual facts of your life of right here, right now.
Yeah.
The rebirth and reincarnation is all about very, very deep past and very deep future and the very importance of all of that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
really, that stuff's not important at all. What's really important is the condition of your mind right here, right now. And so
Mm.
that's the basic conflict. It's not that Bhikku Buddhadasa is against rebirth or teaches against it, but rather that it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
And that when
Hmm.
it becomes relevant, it becomes dangerous. But when it's not relevant, then we don't. In other words, it's a question that has no answer to it. Nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
because we don't even know for sure, it couldn't possibly be important to what's
Right.
happening right now.
I see. Yes. And then when one holds it in their being as a firm belief, then it really messes up this current lifetime when you dwell on the fact that, well, I'll just worry about it in the next life, or I'll just worry about that in the next life, or this happened because previous lives. You're saying that is going to mess up really what's important is this life now. This is here and now, the moment.
This is all we've got is right here, right now.
Yeah, I
And
see.
thinking that something back then or out there is important is ignorance.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, it's powerful stuff. I mean,
Liberating.
yeah, it is. I mean, is there so what is the when I read about rebirth in terms of the Buddha's words, what is that referencing? Does it mean like a rebirth as in a new perspective in this moment, like the past, the present, and the future? Like you're continually reborn in this moment from the past? Like what is your interpretation of that?
Right. Okay. We could say that first off, rebirth is an answer to, or it should be, if it's correctly understood, an answer to reincarnation. Reincarnation definitely requires a soul, except that the Buddha is pointing out that don't nothing have a soul. There
Mm-hmm.
is no carness in a car. There are only car parts. There is no clockness in a clock, just clock parts.
Yeah.
And a gear is not a gear until it's fashioned into a gear, and it's not going to remain a gear. There's no gearness in that gear.
Mm-hmm.
With that understanding, there's also no self within the body. It's just a body. There's no self within the feelings. There's no self within the mind, and there's no self within our thoughts. And yet we attach to the thoughts and think that these are my thoughts. This is who I am. Or this is my body. This is who I am.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Now the question then is that this I, is it permanent? Is it semi-permanent? Is it quasi-permanent? Or is it completely temporary? The Buddha goes with that it's completely temporary, but he doesn't go with that it doesn't exist at all. It just arises, and when it does, so does suffering and dukkha. But those people who believe that it is absolutely permanent, then they forget all about the present and start thinking in the long distant past and the long distant future, because they don't recognize that clocks tick, tick, tick. Right now is all you have.
Mm,
And
mm,
so,
mm.
like for instance, Armageddon, or waiting for the end of the world, hoping for the rapture, right? That's one of the more extreme versions of it. Or waiting for a Messiah, waiting for something to happen. And that is what also gives rise to the quality of hope. And hope destroys right now. If
Hmm.
things are good enough right now, then what's to hope for?
That's a very interesting take. Yeah. Hmm.
The
Hmm.
things right now are good enough. Then, in fact, I just talked to the students recently about in Christianity, the question is, what is worship? What is prayer? And my answer
Hope.
to that about the worship is that worshiping or basking in the glory of God can only be done in the moment, and it's an experience. And this is similar to the experience that people have in any and every religion, and even in things that are not a religion, like Buddhism. Okay, that there is that divine quality of being so in the here now and so connected with everything that everything becomes divine, everything becomes sacred. It's all sacred, everything. We're already living in a holy place.
We're already in heaven.
Pardon?
We're already in heaven.
We're already in heaven. We're in our paradise.
Mm.
But just like Adam and Eve, we get to keep throwing ourselves out of our own paradise by judging it, by thinking that there's something wrong with it, it needs to be fixed. We've got work to do here.
Yeah.
I've got mouths to feed. All of those kind of thoughts prevent us from actually living in the paradise that is our own reality.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. What do you think is the strongest hindrance to us living in the Garden of Eden, that inner Garden of Eden?
Wanting things we don't have,
Yeah.
which would be called then intelligent greed. The more you know that's out there that you don't have, the more you want of it.
Yeah, right. That's the Western world. Man.
Yes, it is. That's it. The Western world, with all of its problems and all of its sadness, is simply because people want things they don't have,
Mm.
rather than learning to be satisfied with the paradise that we're already in.
Yeah. It seems so simple though, isn't it? Like just
It
be
is
here
so
now.
simple. The teaching of the Buddha is absolutely spot on, dead simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple that it can be phrased many ways in just a one liner. I've got a whole dozen one liners if you want to hear them.
Yeah, I'll hear a few of them if you got some.
Okay. My favorite is don't worry, be happy.
It's a classic.
Okay. Another one would be Goenka's never mind, start again.
Mm, I like that.
The Buddha had one of his own, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. In fact, in several different suttas, I mean, this is an important point that he says that the only thing that I teach, just before and now, I teach only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. Now, dukkha, dukkha nirodha means satisfactoriness and the end of being dissatisfied. And most people who get caught up in rebirth and reincarnation and long term past and long term futures, they think that that process is a long term process of going from dukkha to dukkha nirodha. And so they hope for dukkha nirodha rather than just having it right here, right now, because it's already available. All you
Yeah.
have to do is throw the dukkha out, and you're left with nothing much, which is the end of being dissatisfied.
Mm.
When you
Hmm.
learn to be satisfied with nothing at all.
I see. Yes. Mm. Wow.
Because that's all we've got, which is everything. That's the divine, supramundane, or even spiritual aspect to it. Is that
What's
there
that?
is no inherent self in it, But it's up to you. Are you going to relish in it, enjoy it, appreciate it, and thrive in it? Are you going to try to fix it?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. That no self idea is just, there's something the mind just doesn't want to go there. There's just like distractions on distractions, and there's just
It's
there's
actually built in. It's an instinct that's built right in. This is why we think of it that way. And the instinct that's built in has been labeled by the scientists the self-preservation instinct.
uh
And the self-preservation instinct has a language, and its language is fear. Its language is danger, because its job is to preserve the organism. That in fact, the guys who thought it up and began to understand it labeled it wrong. They should have called it an organism preservation instinct rather than a self-preservation instinct,
mm,
because the organism, working as a unit with all kinds of facts and features and all kinds of processes, are all engaged in the let us say the tribal goal of keeping that organism alive, keeping it sustained. Our
mm-hmm.
breathing, our heartbeat, the way the mind works, and all of that. But also because of the dog eat dog jungle world that we grew up in over eons of time in evolutionary senses. There were dangers. Part of the staying alive was don't get eaten,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where that fear comes up. It's part of the self-preservation or the organism preservation instinct. Now, in our society today, and in fact has been that way for quite a while, humans have been fairly civilized, not completely, but fairly civilized with each other, so that we don't ordinarily face life-threatening dangers day by day or even hour by hour. And yet we are still left with that kind of feeling system, that we still feel endangered and we still feel unsafe day by day, sometimes hour by hour. And so what we have to do is we have to actually talk ourselves, just like we talked ourselves from childhood, into feeling afraid, into finding things that were dangerous to fit into this self-preservation instinct. We are now going to see it otherwise, that in fact, right here, right now, there is no danger. I can feel completely safe right here, right now. So can you. There are no alligators on your floor. There are no snakes crawling on the wall. The CIA is not busting in. The SWAT team is not there. The Russian mafia is not there. You're completely safe. There are no dangers. You don't even have a mother-in-law banging on your door. So
Mm,
why is it that we feel so afraid so much of the time when in fact we're actually safe? That's part of being sacred, is you're in a safe place. That's what the word sanctuary is all about. So begin to be in a sanctuary
yeah.
so that you're safe.
Hmm. A
Think of your
sanctuary.
environment as a sanctuary, a completely holy place where
Yeah,
everything is safe and secure.
that's good. Yeah. The sanctuary of no self.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Because it's only the danger of the self. And so if you bring that self into the sanctuary, then all kinds of thoughts will actually attack it.
Oh, yes.
And so this is where the Buddha comes in with actually the practice that most people in Western Buddhism completely miss. And that is the kind of thoughts that we have to be monitored. This is what the Eightfold Noble Path is about. The
Mm-hmm.
Eightfold Noble Path has items like sati, ditti, or right view, right remembering, right effort, and right attitude. Those are the main qualities of the Eightfold Noble Path, and they're spread out that way in the suttas. Though by the time let us say, the ordinary people got it, it's all rearranged. It's all upside down and backwards, and they don't really understand how to operate the Eightfold Noble Path.
Mm.
So the Eightfold Noble Path is basically, number one, is you have to remember to wake up, to come out of your daydreams, come out of whatever you're thinking about, all of your past, your present, your future, and remember to come back to this present moment, to come back and be here now. Once we do that, we investigate. We investigate, yeah, there's no snakes on the floor. We investigate our breathing. We investigate our thoughts and recognize that many of the thoughts that we were having were unwholesome thoughts and kept us in a state of danger. So now with that, we take the right effort to throw unwholesome thoughts out. This is the crowning point of the teaching of the Buddha, is that when you recognize that the thought that you're having right now is dangerous, to change it. His expression with that was, aha, I see you, Mara. Aha, I see you. And by seeing those thoughts of I want something that I don't have, well, I don't have to want it right now. I can be at peace and quiet without having to want that thing. Okay, and so we actually give ourselves jobs to do. Here we are sitting with no place to go and nothing to do, and everything is fine. And we're still thinking about writing that email to the boss, or still thinking about paying that bill, or still thinking about stocking the refrigerator, instead of thinking about what we're doing right here, right now, which is basically nothing. It's that marvelous. I'm in sanctuary now.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Mm.
Well, that's the practice. That's what we call anapanasati. And this is what should be meditation for each one of us, is to remember to stop thinking about all the stuff that's not here and start thinking about and appreciating that which is here. To come back into our sanctuary and appreciate that we're in sanctuary now, that we've got free air to breathe and everything is good.
Mm.
Everything is marvelous right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
Spectacularly so.
Yeah, it really is.
But we have to add the spectacle.
Oh man, that's good. Yeah, would you say it's like a constant return and we almost have to uh this is like we have to repeat the steps of that until we can finally reach that state of being in that state at all times, because it seems like
I wouldn't even have the goal of having it all the time, because that's still a goal. That's still a hope.
I see, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That all we really need to have it is right here, right now. Can you remember to have it now?
Yeah.
This is why sati, or that waking up process, is so valuable a skill to be developed, that the Buddha talks about it as a skill. The skill of remembering to wake up and look at what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's also the skill of inspection. And what I mean by look at what you're doing becomes a skill is because when we're beginners, it's hard for us to see the distinction between what's wholesome and what's not wholesome. That even though there are some things that are absolutely unwholesome, and anybody can see that within their own mind just by looking at it, that it does me no good to hate someone. It does me no good to want to do myself or anyone else any harm. And so we can see those thoughts are automatically unwholesome. We can also see thoughts that, wow, everything is really nice right now. Oh, I am in the presence of the Almighty God, me. And everything is really cool. And everything is quite marvelous. And I'm in my palace. I'm in the kingdom.
Yes.
And so these are the kind of thoughts that could be absolutely dead on spot on as wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual thoughts, heavenly thoughts, thoughts about how nice everything fits together, seeing the unity in things. Those would be absolutely wholesome thoughts. That leaves us a huge, huge gray area in there to discover. And that discovery then is insight. Mm-hmm. That discovery process and that insight comes from investigation. And that investigation always has the quality of that once you do the investigation, you don't just keep investigating the same thing over and over again. If you investigate it to find out that it's not worth having, that it is in fact in the category of unwholesome, you throw it out. And every time you recognize that thought coming in, you throw it out again. This is the repetitive nature of the waking up, looking at what we're doing, and throwing it out. And it begins to be a purification process over and over again, because you're going to have a mixed bag of wholesome and unwholesome thoughts throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
Many people will go so far as to say, I only have unwholesome thoughts. The answer to that is no. We're always a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes we feel good, sometimes we feel bad, sometimes we're satisfied, and sometimes we're full of want. Beginning to wake up to all of that stuff and start to guide the mind so that we can be in a state of satisfaction, free from suffering, free from desire. All we have to do is wake up and remember that we can do that we can change. So that's another way of looking at it, that the Bhikku Buddhadasa's teaching is all a change model. You can change. You are not bound by destiny or providence or any of that kind of stuff. That you can change. You are not a fixed thing. And people who believe in a self or a soul think that, well, that's who I am. No, that's not who you are. You can change, and then you're going not to be the same person that you were before. That personalities are malleable.
Yeah. There's a big fear and change in our in the popular majority for some reason. We don't
Well,
want
let us
change.
say there is fear in all kinds of things, including change.
Mm-hmm.
That people are afraid to change, but they're also afraid not to change. And so they just stay stuck in fear and don't change rather than putting the effort in.
Yeah.
And one of the things to change is the fear itself. Oh, I don't have to be afraid right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yes, you're giving me reasons why most people who are ordinary, even if they hear about the noble Dhamma, they will remain ordinary because they don't take the effort to make the change from some reason or another.
Yeah.
Like I can't, or I won't, or I'm afraid to, or all of that kind of stuff. And then they get angry when somebody else can change. Oh, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be better than me. I'm going to find something wrong with you so that I can claim the high ground here.
Yeah. So would you say the essence of Buddhist philosophy is change, essentially, and it is a way to decondition from our conditionings of the past, whether it's genetic or societal? It's just a way to really rest in our true essence, in our true sanctity, in our true birthright, maybe you could say, as a human being.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And our society, let us say the original bullies, the original headmen of a village, the original warlords of our society have made the rules saying you got to do it the way that you're told to do it rather than doing things the way that you feel to do it. And so we've been built as a society of having an internal conflict. And anyone who gets into authority will still try to make the rules. And so every child who is born into our society, their whole early lifehood is around learning the rules, learning to stand in line, learning to shut your mouth when some bigger person is talking, all kinds of rules that we have to learn. And so we wound up being guided and ruled by our own rules, the ones that we memorized, because basically the rules that are most important to each one of us are the rules that we got caught breaking and had to suffer over it. And so we learned our lesson with those, but then those great big rules kind of rule our lives.
Yeah.
Now, what we need to do is reevaluation and come and start throwing some of these rules out and stay with a really important rule. And what is that really important rule? The rule that the Buddha gave. His whole teaching is dukkha nirodha. If you see dukkha, throw that out and become dukkha free in this moment. Therefore, we don't even have to have issues about ways and means versus outcomes. Okay, that you've heard. Does the do the means justify the outcome? The answer to that is we've only got means. There is never an outcome. There are certain holidays, there is gifts that are given, there are things that are built, get used, and fall apart, and then get destroyed. But there is no outcome. There is only process. All we have is means, this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's make this moment a really good one. And if we can get the skill of making this moment a really good one, then we have a skill we can really use, is making this moment absolutely marvelous, because it actually is already marvelous. See, what makes it not marvelous is our bad attitudes already.
Mm-hmm.
And so waking up to the reality of the situation is actually to remember to come out of our slumber of the rules about how things should be, and start relishing how marvelous things are just the way they are.
Hmm. Yeah. Was
If
there
we can
something?
remember, if we can remember, if we can
Mm-hmm.
remember to keep remembering
Yeah.
that things are already okay.
Yeah. Was there something, or some event or something that happened in your life that got you on this wavelength of remembrance? Was there something that showed you the way, or some kind of experience that happened?
Um, if there were some early experiences, everything kind of accumulates. No one event was that big of an event.
Yeah.
Nothing important ever happened. Not the
Mm-hmm.
baptism when I was 9, not the meditations that I did instead of being listening to the preacher talk, that I would go off into my own meditation worlds and things like that, all the way up to masters in electrical engineering. Nothing to it. But what I did with by working with big corporations and IBM and even teaching university, I still was unsatisfied. And I knew that. That's why I got into psychology. And from psychology into uh, all kinds of new agey stuff back in the 70s. There was just no end to it. I mean, I met Ginger the Witch from, she was in Detroit, but she came from Vladivostok, and boy, was she all dressed up for it. I spent weeks with American Indians, Mad Bear and Chief Beeman Logan, who were a couple of the uh, medicine men, I think that they're called them. So I was just all over the place. And I headed straight for India and spent quite a lot of time with Muktananda, and then went after the big magic, big time, down to see, went to Ponticello and to Bangalore, which had Satya Sai Baba. He was the one who could do holy ash and did wristwatches and jewelry and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And so I did the magic tour with all of the rishis and all the yogis. Spent some time with Rajneesh. Didn't stay long, but then I stayed with Goenka and started staying a long time with Goenka and kept going back to Goenka. So I say that I spent about 3 years with Goenka,
Mm.
either in as a student or assisting about 30 retreats. So I was into it really deep.
Oh.
Then I left Goenka and wound up in Bodh Gaya. And from Bodh Gaya, that's where I heard about Bhikku Buddhadasa. So actually, you could go to say that I went from making a living into not being satisfied, going into psychology, not being satisfied, not dare going back to Christianity because I'd been there my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
into Hinduism, and from Hinduism into Buddhism, and then from Buddhism, the ordinary stuff, into the real deal. That was the path.
Oh, it's quite a
But the
journey.
real deal was still a process.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Oh.
A lot of process.
Mm.
Process that's still going on. It hasn't ended yet.
It never ends, right?
It, well, if it does, I won't tell you because I'll be dead then.
Yeah. Oh man.
But it's
Um,
all sacred. That's the whole point is that now the process is sacred. Now the process is a sanctuary. Now the paradise is a paradise.
mm, mm-hmm. So before, do you think you were just looking for this paradise, and it was just like, you went through all these different locations and I guess different teachers, and there was just something missing. Like there was just something in your mind that was saying this isn't it. But then you met Buddhadasa and you said, wait a second, maybe this is it.
Actually, I would say that part of what with the experience was is that when I got to watch Soen Mok, I felt like I was at home. I have
Mm,
arrived. That it was a feeling. It was not an intellectual experience. It was not a mental aha. I
mm-hmm,
see it now. It was a feeling of having arrived.
mm, mm.
That I was back into the jungle. I was, removed. The jungle boy removed from the jungle is back in the jungle.
Oh, that's great.
So that's the sharing. Is
Yeah,
that you're already there,
we're already
but you
there,
have
man.
to keep practicing because you will keep finding something that's pulling you out of the here and now. And the
Yeah.
more you think about stuff that doesn't exist right here, right now, the less you're paying attention to how marvelous everything is right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm. What would you say to somebody that is like, well, I'm in a lot of pain. Why would I want to be here right now?
I've never been asked that question before. I think that I probably would have headed that kind of thing off long before they asked that.
Mm-hmm.
But in that regard, when they're talking about being in pain right now, I would have them investigate what pain they're in right now. What control or lack of control do they have?
Mm.
Can they get it into a rhythm like with the rhythm of the heartbeat? Because that's often what happens with pain is it's pulsing with the heartbeat. That's why we call it throbbing pain. So can you make it throb? Can you make it stop throbbing and be constant?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tie it to the breathing so that you can make that throb now go very, very low down so that it throbs every 3 to 4, 5 seconds rather than throbbing dozens of times a minute?
Mm-hmm. So even be with the
Okay.
pain.
What can you do with it? Can you kind of play with it? That's the whole point is beginning to play with pain
Mm.
because that's all. I mean, it's just bodily sensations. Begin to think of them as not pain, but as, in fact, just sensations.
Yeah.
Most pain is not bodily sensation pain anyway. It's almost all mental in the sense that a particular sensation, you've got a choice whether you like it or not. Most people don't know they have the choice. And so they automatically start thinking in terms of fear. Oh no, what's to become of my poor arm?
Mm-hmm.
Like now that the pain is there, it'll never stop. Or that better still, the pain is who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they identify with the pain
Yeah.
rather than
I am
disident.
in pain.
I am sick,
Yeah.
or I am angry,
Yeah.
or I am uh, whatever.
Yeah.
So coming out of that I am and recognizing that whatever it is, that's not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But the first place to go is I'm not the one who is the pain. I'm the one who sees the pain. And then
Mm-hmm.
later we figure out I'm not the one who sees the pain. There is just seeing, no see or be.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But there's certainly in the beginning that pain is not me. That's not who I am. I can play with it instead.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
make it move up and down the arm. I can breathe it out. I can ignore it. It's not important. But you see, that's the problem with most people when they have pain, is now the pain is so important that they're not paying attention to all of the other stuff that's not important.
Mm.
Like the fact that they're still breathing. If they start having trouble breathing, now that's something to pay attention to.
Now, would you say that is almost, I guess, the goal? I mean, there's not really a goal, but I don't know any better word to say it, but would you say there's a...
How about a natural outcome of a clean mind?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's actually the way that the Eightfold Noble Path is stated in Sutta number 117 in the Majjhima Nikaya. I'll just give a reference for those who want to look it up. That morality is the natural outcome of a pure mind. It is not the causality. A lot of people think that all sila, samadhi, panya means that you've got to get your act completely together. You've got to get your morality straightened out. And there's a lot of different systems, Christianity included, saying you got to clean up your act.
Mm.
But the Buddha says, no, the mind is the forerunner for all. That we got to at least stay together enough to get the mind cleaned out. But once the mind is cleaned out, in the sense that you don't want anything, now with a noble mind that doesn't want anything, you're just not about to go and kill somebody to get it or to steal it. You've got a higher mind than that. And so morality is actually the outcome of a clean mind.
Yeah.
Just like freedom is the outcome of a clean mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because our behavior is pure only because the mind is pure. We don't have to purify the behavior first.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay. So this is another reason why we're going to spend our time removing unwholesome thoughts and putting wholesome thoughts in the mind instead. So if we have thoughts about something that we want that we don't have, then that's going to create longing, desire, clinging, and possibly bad actions.
Yeah.
But if we recognize, oh, just because I want that wine or that bottle of whiskey, and it's in Tong Sala, 15 kilometers from here, I can do without it right now. I don't need it. Glass of water will be okay instead.
Isn't it interesting that we are a process that can eventually see itself as a process that knows it has to change up how it processes? You know what I mean? But it takes, like, it's like we are, you can come to the ideal of no self, which means we're just cause and effect, dependent origination. We're just this happening, I guess you could say, and not happening at the same time. And then in this happening, there is this strange conscious shift, it seems, in the process that says, wait, hold on, something needs to change. Like in that process, there is that it's like a decision, but it's not a decision, There's like this sense of decision making within how this whole thing happens. But that alone is also just part of the process.
Okay. I would say that we can express that in the sense of the sati, or the waking up.
Mm-hmm.
And that ordinary people do that all the time. That in fact, you could say that if people did not wake up, then every argument would wind up in a murder.
Why do you say that?
Because it doesn't happen because people wake up to that they've gone too far or this is too much.
Mm-hmm.
So the husband slams the door on the way out rather than continuing the argument. So he
Mm-hmm.
uses the slamming of the door rather than slamming the wife.
I see. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So we all wake up, but we almost always wake up too late. Or at least we wake up a lot later than we could. And the sooner we wake up, the easier things are going to be. In other words, when you wake up, just as the argument is getting heated, that's your wake up point. And so you cool it. Or you can wake up just as the argument starts. Hey, I don't do arguments very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can wake up even into the thoughts of, hey, I'm going to argue with this guy. Okay. So this is the process of how soon can we wake up into that argument. And if we don't ever wake up, somebody's going to die.
Yeah. What is the part of the process of discernment? Where does because there seems to be a sense of decision making in this.
Yes, the decision is, do they see dukkha yet? Do they see the danger? Do they see that they've gotten into a disadvantageous place? Or do they see the pain? This hurts. Ouch. So it's a wake-up call. And it may or may not have visions. It may or may not have words, but it certainly does have that recognition of waking up. And so if we can train that waking up process, then we can get better off, so that it's a skill that operates often, it operates strongly, and it operates quickly. That in fact, it's possible for somebody to wake up in an argument and then get thrown right back into it because their awakening wasn't very strong.
See, what gets me, right, is that just in terms of our terminology, is that there's no self. We can conclude that there's no self. We're just this process.
I understand that, but there is a self. Even though that self that is delusional, it's still there. It is. It's in the mind that we do have selfish thoughts. We do have that self-preservation instinct. It does exist.
Just not from how we're led to believe.
But we either get into, in Western terminology, we get into the sense of black and white. It either is, there is a self, there it is, and it can be even be permanent, or the atheists say, no, it's not permanent, it ends at death. And then there's the other side of it, there ain't no self at all. And then there is the idea that, oh, it comes and it goes. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. And so that's the way of understanding it. And that when it does come, it's dangerous. That in fact, it came because of danger. The sense of self is a sense of preservation.
I got you. I see.
And so when we feel completely safe, there's no self to be attacked, then we don't feel selfish at all. But when we feel under attack, we get downright selfish. And so becoming aware to that, becoming aware of it, becoming to see that process, and so we can get ourselves back into a state of safety and security and sanctuary, so that we don't have to act selfishly.
And then we can start to enjoy.
Yeah, we can enjoy our lives instead of being, let us say, on guard.
Yeah. That's what it seems like. Everyone's on guard. We're just like, we got our hands. We're in fighting stance for some reason with each other.
It's our culture. We're raised that way. One of the cases of is racism. That you get 2-year-olds of a variety of colors in the same room together, and they're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Until some adult walks in and wants to separate them out. The racism is always something that's taught. And that it occurs when the child doesn't have any opportunity. So if there is a particular color that's not in that group, let us say green, for instance, so that when a green, especially a little green man, comes into the room, now he's going to be thought by all of the other colors as something special, unique, and probably dangerous, because we haven't seen him before.
Yeah.
But once things are familiar, then there's no reason for any racism. It's only because they're seen as something else, something other, something dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so our society, especially the politicians and the money people and whatnot, capitalize on that instinct. So actually, you can think of it as the territorial instinct. People who are not like me may be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so they make the gays dangerous. They make the Muslims dangerous. They make the blacks dangerous. They make the Latinos dangerous. They make the Asians dangerous.
Yeah.
Because then those people who are filled with fear because of all those dangerous people will then go and vote the way that the fearmongers are telling them to vote.
Yep.
And so as the society is built, I mean, this it's all built into the society, and it rubs off on every one of us as children.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we start looking at that, evaluating and recognizing that society out there, that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm. You think it's in our duty as a collective to change that, to change our ways? I mean, we have to change ourselves first, but do you see in the future a world that's more aligned with what we have just spoke about in the last hour, like being more attuned to accepting each other, living in the moment? I don't know.
Well, you're thinking right now about a world out there which is kind of conceptual. It's a conceptualized idea.
Mm-hmm.
A much better way of looking at it, and the way that I approach it, is you and I are talking. That's all I've got. And so when a student calls, that's what we're doing right here, right now, talking about the Dhamma.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not interested in fixing the world, because
Mm.
there's an awful lot of people out there trying to fix the world already. What group do I join to go fix the world?
Yeah.
Do I join the Democrats? How about the Republicans? How
Mm.
about the John Birch Society? What society do I join that's going to fix this world? The answer is no, there's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So why should I join anything or take on anybody else's? Let's basically do it one by one. That's actually the reason why the Dhamma is best taught that way. It's not really taught very well in a room full of 100 meditation people.
Mm.
It's almost always taught one-on-one.
Yeah, I seem to realize that as I speak to other monastics as well, that there's something about the question and answer format that you don't just get from, say, like a somebody on a podium teaching or something. Like there is something about the investigative format. Like if somebody is truly curious, like I try to be truly curious, and then somebody knows their stuff, like you or somebody else, there's a lot of power in that, being able to really pick somebody's brain. So I definitely agree with that 100%, to like the one-on-one, maybe not even one-on-one, maybe like, what if there's a small group? Would you
A
say like,
small group.
okay, yeah, yeah, I can see that 100%. Yeah.
And I would say that the small group means how many people can the teacher be keeping track of in one
Yeah.
sitting?
Mm-hmm.
20, way too many. 10, that's pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
5 to 8 is doable.
Yeah. Did the Buddha
14 is
say that?
almost an overload. No, that's just my experience.
Mhm. No, I believe that 100%.
He could probably handle more.
Yeah, right. That's funny. Now, is the Buddha one man? Do you believe in that he was one man, Siddhartha Gautama, and he was born of this essence, and he was like the first of his breed, like the first of the breed to be the teacher and the wisest of all?
Well, only from the sense of the fact that we've got a fairly reliable, if not provable, history, that we've had archaeologists. The other thing that I would say that I found out about India when I was there is I became, let us say, impressed with their university system there, which if you just go around the average people, that Indian universities are going to be way down on the list, way below the Ivy Leagues in the States and whatnot. But you could also appreciate that let's use Oxford. Oxford and Cambridge would be two universities that would have a history department that really went deeper into English history than your average Joe Blow, let us say, university in the Ukraine or in Poland or something. But in Poland, they're going to go really deep into Polish history.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's what I found about Indians, is that they were pretty spot on with their history. They know more about their history than others do. And that I learned a lot about Indian history when I was in India. And so there's enough of that history to go back, including all of the important ones. Here's something that's just an example of what we're talking about, is that in the middle 1980s, I think it was 1986, they finally discovered absolute proof of where Lumpini was. They didn't know where it was before. There was a lot of speculation about it. But since that time of the discovery, there's now a city built there. They've got universities. I mean, it's a really, really big deal. And what did they discover? They discovered a pillar that had been done by Asok. And on this pillar, it talks about that this is the birthplace of Sakya Muni. And so that was the solid evidence that they needed of digging up an old stone that was buried there sometime about 150 years after the time of the Buddha. So that's some of the oldest literature that they have that goes directly back to that time. We also know the lineage of the kings of who he knew, that Asok was actually the great-grandson or the great-great-grandson of King Bhumi. I'm kidding. I got the name confused. Let's see. Bimbisara. King Bimbisara was a fan of the Buddha, as well as King Pasenadi. So we've got that history of these kings and their lineages, and what happened centuries later is we also have the history of the Sangha. So there is so much. When people don't have a clue about the history, then they wonder, well, did it really exist or not? The same thing is true about Jesus, is that now we know that the amount of information that goes back to the point of did he exist or not is very scanty, to where the information and the artifacts and all of that we have to go back to the Buddha is fairly solid. Century after century after century, marching right back, all the way back to then. And so in that regard, I don't have to say whether I believe it or not. We'll just leave the facts as they are, open and well accepted. Okay, that's the way of looking at it, is that I don't have to believe in anything. I've got the facts.
Yeah. Proof is in the pudding.
Right. So, and not only that, but there's more to it than that. And that is that now, as the way that I see with my relationship with Ajahn Po, with Bhikku Buddhadasa, and also know prior monks that were part of their society and lineage, as well as all of the monks that I have seen and known both in the United States and elsewhere, that the teachings of the Buddha is absolutely spot on back to that time, that there has been a lineage of royalty, of nobility, and that it transcends the countries. That I don't want to give people the idea that it's only in Thailand, because I won't go into the great details of it, but I did get summoned basically to Denver, Colorado one time. Not summoned, but basically, oh, won't you go with us? And these guys, these two monks, took me to a senior monk in Denver, because he was surprised that a Westerner would actually know the Noble Dhamma. That's when I got involved with the Laotian community, was because I was respected for the fact that I actually knew the teachings of the Buddha. But it was a great deal for me to recognize that, hey, it's not just Thailand, it's not just Bhikku Buddhadasa, that the actual teachings of the Buddha, the real teachings, are known in pockets throughout all of Asia. This is why the reason that the Bhikku Buddhadasa and folks like the Dalai Lama knew each other, because they saw community, they saw Sangha, they saw a connection of a deep understanding of exactly what the Buddha was teaching, which has to do with this here, this now, this where we are is all we have. This is it. And your choice is, are you going to have this here now in dukkha? Or are you going to be free from your own dissatisfactions? Your choice. And that's the basics of the teachings. And that basic teaching is known widely. A lot of people know it intellectually, but the monks are the ones who intentionally practice it.
What was before the Buddha, would you say? What would be the closest thing to the Dhamma? The Dharma? Like the
Well,
Vedas?
actually, if you look at the word the Dhamma, the way that it is, the word tata or tatata and Dhamma are closely related. You could say that, in fact, the Dhamma could also be translated as the thing. So Buddha Dhamma would be the Buddha's thing. Okay, but the thing means something real. And so the word Dhammakai means the full body of all things, or that would be the universe, would be the Dhammakai, the full body of the Dhamma. And so the Dhamma is actually right here, right now. The Dhamma is that which we sense.
I more so meant like the teachings of the Dhamma.
Well, the teachings of the Dhamma, when it's correct Dhamma, that's the teaching. That's it. The Dhamma is, this is it. The Buddha even referred to himself as the Tathagata. You probably heard that word before. It's translated in English as thus gone one, but they use the word thus instead of this. So the thus gone one means someone who is in the present moment, here now. That's what the Tathagata means, is someone who is present in this moment. And so that's basically the teaching of the Buddha, is to be here now, to be in the present moment, to be with the Dhamma that does exist, rather than the concept in the mind that doesn't exist.
So why was the man of the Buddha so renowned? Was he just really good at teaching the Dhamma, or was there something different about that, or is that just irrelevant? We don't even
Actually, the word Buddha is a late thing. I'm not even sure when it came about. That in the time of Ashoka, 150 years after, we're talking about 200 BC, 270 BC, that time period, he was known as Sakyamuni, or the sage of the Sakyams. This elevation into superhuman was something that happened later over time. The over-relevance, the religion application of the Buddha.
Buddhism.
Buddhism, right. In other words, when too many people come, if you've got a beautiful well, a magnificent well that puts out as much water as anybody can come, and then you have 10,000 people come to that well, soon as all of a sudden that well is empty, even though it's still got water and they're still drawing the water out of it, but 10,000 it doesn't feed because they can't get the water out of the well fast enough, right? That's exactly what happened with Buddhism in the time of Ashoka. That for him, it became a state-sponsored organization. He built housing, he clothed the monks, he gave them food, and he supported them as a state institution. This caused any and everybody to drop what they were doing and become a monk. Now, at that time, there was approximately, though they say, about 500 arahants. But when you all of a sudden have, instead of having 500 students or 1,000 students for 500 arahants to handle, now you've got 20,000 or 30,000 or 40,000. When that happened, then the students who came to that new university wound up teaching themselves because there was not enough real professors to go around. That's what happened to Buddhism, and we know that it happened about 250 BC.
Mm. Mm.
That was the start of the Mahayana. They even called it the Mahasanga. Basically, what happened was is that when the monks recognizes that this thing has gotten out of hand, we need to have a conference so that we can tell who is who. They actually did. And only arahats, only those who really understood the teachings of the Buddha, got in to this conference. Unfortunately, because of the king, it was held in the capital, which meant the capital was full of a whole lot of monks that did not get into that inner club, that conference.
Mm.
So they decided to have a conference of their own. And that was the start of the Mahasanga, which is now known as Mahayana.
Oh. Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
So
Wow.
Mahayana started right there in India. It did not start in Tibet, as some
Wow.
people think, or China.
So those are the guys, the lineage that didn't quite make it into the club, is what you're saying.
Right. That's
Hmm.
not to say that people who stayed in their lineage didn't figure it out. In fact, the Dalai Lama is a really clear example that even though the Mahayana got started that way, it didn't mean that it did not get infiltrated by wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. Wow. So what is the main difference between Mahayana and Theravada?
The main differences between Mahayana and Theravada is the culture of the countries in which they reside.
Mm-hmm.
The actual teachings of the Buddha, when it goes to Thailand, looks like Thai Buddhism. When it goes to Tibet, it looks like Tibetan Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
When it goes to China, it looks like Chinese Buddhism. When it goes to Japan, it looks like Japanese Zen Buddhism.
I see.
But the real teachings are either, let us say, optionally, either go along or not. That
I
it
see.
is possible for monks to go into a particular area and the people revere those monks, but the real teaching dies out.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite possible that the real teaching dies out. But it's also possible for the real teachings to stay alive. But those real teachings are unconcerned with the culture of the people who they live among. In other words, the Tulku tradition of Tibet, the monks who understand it correctly are not about to try to change it unless there's a good reason to. An example of that is now that the Panchen Lama has been nabbed by the Chinese and they've got their fingers in the next life of the Dalai Lama, he's just taken the position, hey man, I'm not coming back,
Mm-hmm.
just to keep the Chinese from saying that he did.
Yeah.
And they've got him.
Wow. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dalai Lama's not coming back. Doesn't need to. Don't
Wow.
need it. Have a new one. Now, you also asked a question that we can go back and mention, and that is what about before the time of the Buddha? The Buddha's own way of saying it is that he did not invent anything, that he's a master collector. In fact, you could think of the Buddha as a master junkyard manager. That's all he is. He's just a junkyard manager. And he said himself that this is an old path that I discovered that's been around for, I guess in our language, for centuries or millennia, and that is freely available to anyone to discover for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
It is
see.
not necessarily secret.
Hmm.
Anybody can figure it out. Examples of people who have figured it out would be like Eckhart Tolle. He didn't need anything other than the knowledge of dukkha. He says, my life sucks. I'm just going to sit here on this park bench until it don't suck no more.
Oh yeah. Is that actually what happened?
That's what I hear. I wasn't there.
That's funny. As well, that's like a similar story of being under the Bodhi tree.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm going to sit here and, well, no, actually, the Buddha didn't. What he was doing under the Bodhi tree was after he figured out what needed to be done. And
Mm.
so, under the Bodhi tree, he did that figuring out what needed to be done. That's where the statement of, aha, I see you, Myra, comes from, when he was actually putting together the concept of paticca samuppada, which basically means the word paticca means causality, and samuppada means things don't come really into existence without a reason or a cause. And so he started looking at that causality. What's the cause of suffering? The cause of suffering is selfishness. What's the cause of selfishness is clinging. And the cause of clinging is greed. And the cause of greeding is liking. And the cause of liking is that we're contacted by things. And what we're contacted with is actually not a real thing, it's an imaginary image in the mind. And so if you think about it, I've just marched down backwards through paticca samuppada.
Man, that was good. Wow.
From dukkha to jati to bhava to upadana to tanha to vedana to pasa down to salayatana. The internal image that we have is what contacts us. And how do we come up with that is through perception. That when we see something on the outside, we don't just accept what we see on the outside, we bring it inside and try to make sense out of it based upon our past.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever we see now doesn't actually come now, it comes with its own past that we've just added to the mix.
Oh, is that like your rendition of karma?
Well, we can talk about karma in many ways. The word karma actually means action. That's what the word means. And so
Mm-hmm.
karma vipaka means the result or the fruit of our actions would be karma phala. The fruit of our actions is almost, according to the Buddha himself, immediate, based upon cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
I say something to my wife and I immediately wake up and regret that I've said it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't have to wait until my next life for her and her God to dig me up to kick my ass. She's going to do it right then.
Mm-hmm. Oh man.
So, this is the way that we begin to understand action and reaction. Actually, much of the time that when we think we're acting, we're merely just reacting, which means we're acting exactly the same way that we did last time. That we're
Mm-hmm.
not putting anything new into it. We're still doing the same old thing with new data.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's
what
how we react and react. So the point is can we wake up to what's really going on right now so that we can act in the present moment the way things really are? I do
mm-hmm.
not have to react to my wife as if she was my mommy spanking me. I can see her as a beautiful doll that I love right now.
Were you ever married?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have to go into that. Just wondering. But yeah, what got me on the topic of karma was because you said just simply be in the perception without attaching any kind of narrative to it. So I just for some reason that got me on the idea of like the cause and effect. Like there is no cause and effect. It's like reaching the point of just simply just seeing the cause and effect as one, like being behind that idea, that cause and effect of perception, like not necessarily like a physical action, like in the mind of just simply seeing it for what it is rather than the mind saying this is this way or this is how it is, or it's rather than attaching some kind of conceptual label to the happenings of whatever goes on. um that's why I came up with the idea of karma. I don't know if that even relates within the Dhamma, but it's like it's like just simply seeing things how they are without attaching a label, right? Is that kind of what, just
Mhm.
simply seeing, like just being and seeing, and without attaching a story to it. That seems to
Right.
be the
Let us say
gist.
then that the attaching the story to it would be the karma. That's our action,
Yeah.
rather than allowing things to be the way that they actually are and appreciating that and continuing to, let us say, gather more data about this present moment. We come to a pre-decided conclusion. Oh,
Hmm.
this fits into that. Therefore, this new thing is that.
Yeah.
Therefore, instead of reacting to this new thing, I'm going to react to that old thing
Hmm.
instead. And so this new thing is nothing but a new face on the old thing that I react to.
Yeah. Would
And
you
so
say?
when we can see that process, then we can change it. We
Hmm.
can say, no, I'm going to react to this present moment like it is present, not like
Hmm.
it was in the past.
I see. Hmm. And that's
That's
freeing
that's the
ourselves.
wake up. That's the
Yeah.
freedom, and that's the waking up. That's the wake up to recognize that this is what's happening right now, and it's not in the past. It's not
Hmm.
old. But in our society, we are taught to figure things out, to put things together, to take the test, the multiple choice test. You got to come up with a solution, and speed is everything. And so
Yeah.
we're actually teaching people to think badly
Yeah. From a young age.
at a pretty young age. That's right. And so coming out of those habits and having pre understood conclusions or ready made answers, we come up with just information that remains unprocessed and there are no answers.
Hmm.
That it's the investigation, not the conclusion. We're not after conclusions, we're after what's happening in the process right now.
Hmm.
So we don't have to figure it out. This is why, in fact, one of the things that Achan Po said often was not sure. That's the term, not sure. It's okay to be not sure. We don't have to go figure it out. We can just continue to investigate and just keep looking. We don't have to come to conclusions.
Hmm.
Just remain not sure.
That's good. That's good. I
It's
like that a lot.
terrifying for most people. It's terrifying. We're
Yeah.
supposed to be sure.
Yeah,
So
that's
learning
not
to
just
be
a.
comfortable and happy and satisfied and secure when we're unsure.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's good. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Wow. It's absolute freedom
Yeah.
just to say, I don't know. And that's okay. I can still be okay.
Yeah.
Or another way of saying it is that we don't need to know everything to become enlightened, just enough.
Just enough.
Just enough. All you need to know is just enough. And that is right here, right now is good enough. And we don't have to pile on baggage.
Hmm.
We can
Yeah.
stay light.
Don't overcomplicate it.
Hmm. Things
That's
are
great.
not complicated until we add something from the past
Hmm.
or something from the future. But right now, things are not complicated.
That's great. What are your thoughts on Maitreya? Is this a future,
Maitreya.
the future Buddha, prophesized future Buddha?
Oh, welcome to this Zoom cast. Yes, you are, in fact, and so am I, in front of Maitreya. Here he is, the Buddha of the West.
That's awesome. That's great. That's awesome. Yeah,
I've got a dog in the corner. She's Maitreya also. I learned so much from her.
it's a state of consciousness. It's more of like a,
State of mind, exactly.
yeah, that's awesome. I asked that to Ajahn Sona, and he said the same thing. Oh, hmm. Wow, that's great. You know what? We can probably wrap it up at that. You got any closing statements for the world?
Don't worry, be happy.
Beautiful. Wow.
Remember, this present moment is good enough.
Yeah, it is. It is. Wow. And with that one, yeah, I thank you so much for your
Gary,
time.
this has been really great. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. I really did too. But other than that, for the listener, for anyone that has listened this long, I'll put everything down in the description of the video where they can find you. And yeah, wish you all the best, my friend.
Yes, if I can, calls are available on Skype
Mm-hmm.
during daytime in Thailand. So put a link in the description of this video, and anybody who wants to call, welcome.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Appreciate your time. Appreciate what you're doing for the world.
Oh, I'm not doing this for the world. I'm doing this because I have fun at it. If this wasn't fun, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, that's true. I know. Even though, yeah, well, there is the fun, but you're also doing a lot of good at the same time.
Well, that's up to them.
That's
I
true.
can tell you people who think that I'm not, they would really love to shut me up because they can't make a profit off of what I'm saying.
Yeah, so true. Well, yep, wish you all the best. And other than that, peace.
May you have a really good moment.
You as well. I wish you a good moment. Goodbye, friend.
Okay, bye-bye. I hope we can be.
Yes.